When Clay pulled up to his family ranch a day earlier than planned, he expected peace and quiet, maybe the scent of pine, maybe some dust in the wind. What he did not expect was strangers walking off his property carrying his father's prized Winchester rifle. His boots hit the dirt fast as he stormed toward the barn, heart pounding. Inside stood Trish Donnelly, head of the HOA and self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, smiling, shaking hands, finalizing sales like she owned the place. "You abandoned the property, Clay," she said, cool and smug. "I have the authority to liquidate what's left to cover your outstanding debts." Clay was speechless. This land had been in his family for generations. Those rifles were not just antiques, they were history, heirlooms, sacred, and now being sold like cheap junk at a yard sale. But Clay knew one thing for sure. This was no misunderstanding. This was war, and Trish had just fired the first shot. Later that evening, after the shocking encounter with Trish, Clay started looking around the ranch more carefully. Something felt off. The back door to the barn had deep scratches near the lock, and the window in his father's old study had a broken latch. Inside, a few drawers were slightly open, and papers he never touched had been shuffled around. That is when the truth hit him. Someone had broken into his home. Clay's heart sank, but he kept his calm. He did not call the police right away. Instead, he decided to get proof. The next morning, he quietly installed small hidden cameras throughout the house, the barn, and especially near the gun safe. He had a gut feeling that this was not over, and that Trish was not done. Just 2 days later, his suspicions were confirmed. The footage showed Trish returning to the ranch before sunrise. She wore gloves, a hoodie, and moved like someone who had done this before. She forced her way into the barn, went straight to the safe, and began pulling out Clay's vintage rifles, lining them up as if preparing for a store display. She even paused for a moment, holding the old Winchester, brushing her hand across the barrel like she was admiring it. Then she made phone calls, checking her list, preparing for another illegal sale. Clay watched the footage with clenched fists. This was not a mistake. This was a setup. Trish had planned everything, from the break-in to the lies about his debts, and now he finally had the proof to take her down. The next morning, Clay decided it was time to confront Trish. He drove to the barn where she had been setting up her so-called sale and stood right in front of her. "You do not belong here," he said firmly. "This is my land, and those rifles, you stole them." Trish did not flinch. Instead, she calmly reached for her phone and dialed 911. With a completely straight face, she told the dispatcher, "There is a dangerous man trespassing on the property. He is armed, and I feel threatened." Clay could not believe what he was hearing. She was flipping the entire situation, turning herself into the victim and painting him as some kind of criminal. It was a bold, dangerous lie. Minutes later, police sirens echoed through the quiet ranch. Officer Reese Langford stepped out of his patrol car, hand near his weapon, approaching with caution. Clay raised both hands slowly and said, "Officer, I can explain everything, but you need to see something first." Without hesitation, Clay pulled out his tablet and played the security footage. The video clearly showed Trish breaking into the barn, opening the gun safe, and taking out the rifles piece by piece. Officer Langford's expression changed quickly, from alert to shocked and then to angry. He looked at Trish. "Ma'am, is there any reason you were on this man's property at 5 a.m, stealing firearms?" Trish stammered, searching for words, but the damage was done. Clay had the truth, and now so did the law. Even after being caught on camera, Trish refused to back down. In fact, she got even more aggressive. Within days, Clay started receiving strange letters, official-looking notices claiming his ranch had been seized, overdue fines piling up, and threats of legal action if he stayed on the property. But Clay had never seen these documents before. The signatures were fake, the dates were wrong, and the letterhead poorly copied and clearly altered. Then came the text messages. Neighbors started getting warnings, saying Clay was mentally unstable and dangerous, and that the HOA had full authority to remove him. It was all a lie, but Trish was trying to destroy Clay's name in the community, one message at a time. People he had known for years were starting to question what was true. That is when Clay called in help. Cassidy Bain, a sharp and fearless lawyer who had dealt with HOA corruption before, stepped in. After reviewing the evidence, she came up with a brilliant plan. Together, they created a fake surrender agreement, a document that looked like Clay was giving up his property rights. But hidden in the digital file was something Trish could not see, a special code that would show exactly who edited or shared it. Cassidy sent the bait, and just like they expected, Trish took the trap. She forwarded the fake document to the county office, claiming it as proof Clay had given up his land. Within hours, Cassidy pulled the tracking data and confirmed it. Trish had not only tampered with the file, but she had also submitted forged paperwork to the authorities. Now they had everything they needed: lies, theft, forgery, intimidation, and hard digital proof to back it up. Trish's empire of fear was about to crumble. Clay knew that if Trish's lies were going to end, it had to happen in front of everyone she had fooled. So he requested time to speak at the next Ranchers Association meeting. It was standing room only. Neighbors packed the hall, curious and confused, unsure what to believe. Some still trusted Trish. Others were starting to ask questions, but no one was ready for what Clay was about to reveal. He stepped up to the front, holding a remote and his tablet. "I want to show you the truth," he said calmly, then tapped the screen. First came the footage, clear video of Trish sneaking into his barn before sunrise, opening his gun safe, and pulling out each rifle with care. Gasps filled the room. Clay let it play all the way through. Next, the audio. Clay played the 911 call where Trish called him a dangerous trespasser. The room went quiet as her voice echoed from the speakers, calm and calculated, painting Clay as a threat while knowing full well she was the criminal. Then came the final blow: financial records. Clay showed a list of HOA expenses and bank transfers. Almost $57,000 was missing. Money collected from the community for repairs, road maintenance, and upgrades, gone, and all of it traced back to Trish. But Clay was not the only one ready to speak. One neighbor stood up. "She fined me $500 because my goats made too much noise," he said. "She called it an unauthorized livestock violation." The crowd laughed bitterly. Another added, "She tore out my garden, said the flowers were too bright for the neighborhood image. I've never forgotten that." Person after person stood to share their story, years of threats, ridiculous fines, and bullying. And with each voice, the spell Trish had over the community broke a little more. She sat in the back, frozen, her once confident expression now full of panic, because this time there were no lies left to hide behind. By the time Clay finished speaking, no one had any doubts left. The evidence was overwhelming: videos, audio, documents, witness statements. Trish had not just broken the rules, she had broken the law over and over again. As the meeting ended, police officers entered the room. Trish tried to slip out quietly, but Officer Reese Langford stopped her near the door. "Trish Donnelly," he said firmly, "you're under arrest for grand theft, embezzlement, fraud, and racketeering." The crowd went silent as the cuffs clicked into place. Some people watched in shock, others nodded quietly. Clay stood still, watching as the woman who tried to ruin his life was finally being held accountable. But this was not just about punishment, it was about change. In the weeks that followed, the community held a special election. They chose Milton Crane, a fair and level-headed rancher who had always stayed out of HOA politics, until now. His first act as president? Hiring Cassidy Bain as the association's legal advisor to build real protections against abuse of power. No more secret meetings, no more fake fines, no more fear. For the first time in years, the community felt like it belonged to the people again. A few weeks later, the ranch looked different, not just in appearance, but in spirit. The tension that once lingered in the air was gone, replaced by the smell of smoked brisket and the sound of laughter. Clay had invited the entire community for a barbecue, not just to eat, but to celebrate. Tables were lined with homemade pies, pulled pork, sweet tea, and laughter. Children ran across the fields where silence once ruled. Neighbors who had not spoken in years shared stories and jokes like old friends. For Clay, it was more than just a party. It was healing. Inside the barn, resting in a polished gun case, were his rifles. Every single one returned. His father's Winchester sat at the center, freshly cleaned and shining under the soft light. To Clay, it was not just a weapon. It was a piece of his family's history, a reminder of everything that had been fought for and finally protected.